The wide variety and the tapestry of South African cultural diversity means that we sometimes have languages that aren't reflected in the official statement of what South African languages are. We have cultural practices and subcultures that are important for the livelihoods and the meaning of our people. Our history tells us that we've come a very long way. But the question is, what criteria does the state use to declare languages official? And why do some languages in South Africa remain unrecognized 30 years after democracy? Welcome to Democracy 30. My name is Oliver Dixon. Thank you so much for joining us. Language politics remains a sensitive feature of our discussion. After many languages were obliterated during apartheid, so far the country has 12 official languages, with Khilubedu being touted to be the 13th. Others are still fighting for recognition. Tonight we ask, has South Africa lived up to its promise to treat all languages equally? Joining us for this discussion this evening is Khilubedu, representing the Mandebele National Organization, Inkosi Khatebe Bukosi, representing Amahlubi Nation, and from Polokwane, we're joined by Lance Schultz, the CEO of the Pan-South African Language Board. But first, let's hear what your views are on whether South Africa treats languages equally.
I don't think that all languages are equal. I think that because some languages are languages that we're using each and every day, so we forget about other languages.
I feel like some of them are treated more importantly, like looking at your TV, the content that we see there.
We must have seen also as to how tribalism has played a role in this separation and in this preferential treatment of languages, be it in media coverage, be it in school curriculum activities. We've seen how certain languages are being prioritized more than other languages.
Economically, you need English to succeed, whether it's school or business, and in many places you still need Afrikaans as well.
Every language must be treated equally. There must be no language that must be above than the other.
We have more than 11 official languages. I think now they added sign language now.
No, I don't believe so, because no, the dominant language in South Africa is Zulu. You go everywhere, people want to speak Zulu.
Black skin like me, you speak Afrikaans, they treat you like less than the other languages.
Naki bua Sesotho, and I meet a lot of people who speak various languages, and I can see that now everyone is accommodative.
I believe we treated equal because if
no, they are not treated equally. You see, you go to one school, you find that only 2 languages are taught, the others are not taught. Why?
And thank you so much for being with us. I want to start the conversation this evening with the CEO of PanSlab. Lance, good evening. Thank you so much for being with us. Really do appreciate it. Fundamental question. Do we have, in practice, not just in principle and on paper, an equal treatment of all languages in South Africa?
Firstly, a very good evening to you and all of your viewers. And the question that you are posing is not one-dimensional. I think there's multiple facets that one has to recognize. And one of the things that the settlers and the colonizers did in South Africa is to ensure that trade, industry, commerce, as well as religion, all had embedded their languages and the practices that came with it. And we are still trying to get rid of the shackles of that even today. I think that our constitution, the Pan-South African Language Board Act, as well as the Use of Languages Act, is sufficient to ensure that there is an absolute parity of esteem. And secondly, that we give recognition to all of our languages in our country. And the officialization of languages is one aspect, but the second is to ensure that we preserve and promote these other languages, and it can only really be done through the effective use of it and to ensure that multilingualism is embedded with that practices. So it's not a very simple question, but I think the solution in it lies in terms of ensuring that there's use and that communities actually stand up to ensure that these languages continue to be used in civil society, whether it be in the public, the private sector, and ensure that those languages can be preserved.
Yeah. I want to bring you into the conversation, Mr. Papiki. effectively, perhaps take us to the heart of where some of these disparities that do exist in languages come from. You identify as Mandebele, you speak a very specific language, not a dialect, a very specific language, which in South Africa is recognized as Ndebele when that's not the name or the designation of the language that you think it's supposed to be. Talk to us about where you think that disparity comes from.
Yeah, thank you so much, Oliver. We are having what you can refer to as the Ndebele that falls within the Zunda group of Nguni languages. And you are also having the Ndebele that falls within the Tegela group of languages. So we are the Tegela Ndebele. When we say we're talking city, Sia Sumaela. The Zunda,
Sumaela.
yes, Sia Sumaela Tina. The Zunda Ndebele, Bayakhuluma. There is a lot of disparities which we cannot have sufficient time.
Which one does the government recognize? Sumaela or?
At this point in time, the Constitution just mentioned Ndebele. But because the Zunda Ndebele is officially studied at schools from primary school all the way to your tertiary education, we will say it is the one that is being recognized.
Right. Nkosi, is that a similar experience for Abahlubi?
But exactly the same problem as we have as Amahlubi. It's a very sad situation whereby you grew up speaking the language with your parents, with your grand, and then watching the language fading in front of you. It's a very painful experience. So it's exactly the same situation as the Ndebele, the northern Ndebele.
Yeah.
We are also part of a Tekela group, actually. Even if you can now start understanding our history, it will tell you exactly how do we
Actually, very briefly, what is that history? How does the Tekela group of languages come about?
Now, the Tekela group it's tightly given to the kind when you talk, the way we talk, which I was Tegel. It's like how the Swati start to talk, the way they speak the language. That is why now they say we are Tegeling, So, as I said, our problems as a Hlubis and the problems of the Ndebele is exactly the same problem.
What officially happens if the language of the Hlubis die out?
Then the identity is gone. Because once you kill, if you want to kill a person, you must kill this language. Then that person don't have anything, as much as the painful experience of the San people, whereby now is only one older member of the community which can still speak a pure language. The rest, they are not. So it means we are not existing anymore. That it means Amahlubi are not existing if the language have to die, and we're not doing anything about it.
Is Tegela and Ndebele dying out?
Yes, it is on the verge of dying. If something's not been done, I can promise you in approximately 30, 40 years it will be gone.
Do you have a sense of how many people speak the language?
Well, at this point in time, I can say that we have conducted a survey, so we cannot say exactly how many. But what we know is that we can take you back to the 1980 statistics, which were saying that, Amadravele, which are the ones, Begsumaila, they were more than 500,000. And when you were looking even for Amandebele or Kuluma, they were also more than 500,000. So if we can do, maybe extrapolate up to now, we can say that
based on population growth.
Yes, yeah. we can say that they are both more than 2 million people for both sides.
So how did it come to be that Zunda Ndebele is more dominant than Tekela Ndebele?
First and foremost, Oliver, if you are having the levers of power So for them to accept to have the homeland, it has assisted them in that they had the resources that they have used to develop their language. If you don't have resources, you want to develop your language. So one of the professor's adverts, Professor Skibakiba Lkhwati, has written about this topic widely, where he has mentioned that, well, there are politics which are associated with homelands. So homelands were only interested in their specific language, the language of those who are the elites, who are ruling. They were the ones who will promote that particular language. And then others, even when they may come and say, we would also like to see our language getting the same recognition and investment, it will just fall into deaf ears.
Is language recognition a contested terrain, Lance?
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. It is a contested terrain. I think the manifestation from post-apartheid to where we are now, we're seeing a resurgence, particularly of tribalism, and there is a sense that there are groupings of people that are trying to amass as much social and economic development or opportunities to ensure that they can preserve who they are in their respective geographical communities. So it is a highly contested space. And I just want to correct one of the previous speakers that the language in the Khoisan San cohort that was referred to is the Ngu language. We've actually managed to develop orthography. We've managed to put a dictionary in place to ensure that that language can actually continue. There are community schools, but there are, of course, other languages and dialects and varieties that exist within the Khoisan San as well as Nama language fraternity. It's something also that I would like to point out that in order for us to reverse the loss of people that are speaking these languages, we need to ensure that we work with the schooling system to ensure that these languages are actually incorporated as part of languages of learning and teaching and as part of curriculum development. And our national lexicographical units as well as our national language bodies become important to ensure that each of these languages actually do continue to exist.
Yeah, we have exactly 1 minute, Angos, and I want to ask you perhaps this. Is documenting a language the best possible and most important way of preserving it?
Well, it's one of the best, one of the options we're having now, to document language so that we can, the generation can be able to learn it from schools, you know, and they can, so documenting the language is very, very critical for us to save what we have now.
I want to talk about the resources we allocate to preserving languages, such as documenting and making sure it's taught in school, but also making sure that enough people speak it and to formalize it in how we have social interactions. We continue the conversation on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back to Democracy 30. Tonight we ask the question, has democratic South Africa treated all languages equally? Perhaps to continue the conversation, let's talk about our pre-democratic history, because it plays a big role in where our languages are today. How much of what we have lost as far as language, culture and practice is concerned can be rooted very specifically in colonialism, imperialism and consequently apartheid?
Okay, first of all, just to answer your question, there's an article already that we have already made. We made the article in conjunction with the University of Michigan in the USA. That article explained exactly what is the problem that were caused because of the language is not being taught, is not being used. How we suffered in terms of being now given a new identity from other tribes, you see. So that's it.
And they grouped everybody together as one, and you sort of had to assimilate into it. That reflects in the education system, Mr. Papiki. What have we done wrong in South Africa's early democracy to make sure that we don't chart on a 30-year trajectory where we continue to lose languages? Are there decisions that the administrators of our education system could have made much earlier?
Indeed, they could have made them much more earlier, in that there were already situations whereby, like I will say, we had already reached out to them. Like 1997, there was a march which was made by the Ndebelers. They went to the
Nelson Mandela was still the president?
Yes. And then it did give the go-ahead to the Department of Education, which eventually shifted that responsibility to the province of Limpopo, which things stagnated there.
What was the instruction and why did those things stagnate?
Well, the instruction was to say, help the Mandebele people, because already they've got a manuscript. So we've got an orthography which was written as far back as 1959 by a socio-cultural anthropologist by the name of Professor Dezir Vogel. And pencil was brought into the fray. They ended up also approving it, but for it to be spread into the wider schools in the province, that didn't happen. So there were pilot projects which were happening in one of the villages around Gamkombani, which used to be Port Gietersrus. The village there is Gagapeni, so it was taught there. And now the Department of Education in Limpopo province ended up interfering and said that, well, this cannot be going on. Why? Because they claim that it is a dialect of the Ndebele that is already official, which it is not. As we have mentioned, the other one is Zunda, the other one is a Tegala language. So a Tegala language can never be a dialect of a Zunda language. It is just impossible. In that, the social-cultural anthropologists themselves, as they were commissioned by the apartheid government, and even some scholarly articles have suggested that, well, should you try to match the two languages, you will end up with a completely new language.
What's different in the language? Is it the words you use? Is it the sentence structure?
The sentence structure, as we are saying that, well, the other one is Zunda, the other one is Tegala. So there's the Zunda, like, for instance, I'll tell you, the Zunda, it uses the root ZI, whilst the Tegala languages, the root that is being used there is the TI. So these are completely very different. And the other thing that perhaps we need to maybe to delve much more deeper into is to say that, well, it is the old problem of Embo Ngoni languages, where we want to call anything to be Ngoni languages. Some of the languages within the Ngoni group, they are originally not Ngoni. They are Embo languages. So that's why you will notice there will be others who will be using, like we are saying, Amazulu, Amandebele, Emaswati, Mandebele, and so forth. Yes.
Lance, why have we not been able to get languages that aren't officially recognized to be recognized sooner enough, and then to get it permeating throughout our education system, our social, cultural, political, and economical institutions that make up what it means to be a citizen, the institutions that you interact with?
Firstly, I think what's important is to note the contestation when it comes to ensuring that speakers of a language that might perceive that it's not a dialect, that it's not a variant, that it actually is a fully fledged language. These are the type of contestations that we are seeing coming to the fore much more prolifically in recent times. Secondly, the important thing to note is that this undergoes rigorous constitutional processes. The decision on what becomes an official language and what gets recognized has to undergo due process. And we as PANSALP act as an ultimate quality assurer. But what I want to proposition to the previous speaker, and apologies I didn't get the name, is to reach out to my office, and doesn't necessarily need to take the form of a linguistic human rights issue, but something for us to investigate. That is why we've got experts through our national language body to try and ascertain the veracity of the claim, to have a look at the not just the pedagogical basis, but also to have a look at the historical nature of the language, and try to make a determination where it should find its space. And the issue of it having been piloted, it's not something I can answer for. Suffice to say that the Department of Basic Education is piloting from next year the mother tongue-based bilingual education program for all of our official languages across the country. So this is something we should be looking forward to.
Yeah. Maybe from a process perspective, Lance, what is the process, however rigorous it may be, to get a language recognized?
All right, so there's a number of systemic issues that has to be addressed. Firstly, is to ascertain the number of speakers. Secondly, to determine exactly what the origin of the language is. Thirdly, for a report to be formulated so that it can serve as a business case to determine what the merits and possible demerits are for that language to actually get that official status. We've seen with South African Sign Language that it went through quite a rigorous process, and there's also a very important component of community consultation. And it's through that one can ascertain exactly what not just the veracity of the need for it, but also what's the importance in terms of social cohesion is for that particular language. That's a parliamentary process, and PANSALP can be pulled in to provide strategic guidance and support into that.
As the Amahlubi tried to participate in such a process to make sure that it gets that recognition, and what was the experience of it?
We have done some initiatives for ourselves to produce books, to produce material. Like he said, they managed to develop the orthography of the Sindebele, exactly what the Khilubedu have done. So there are some documented that already were in possession, such as this was here. So we did just sit and wait maybe for government to do something, but we've done already some milestones. We've taken some issues already in the language to try to preserve as much as we can.
Are there those within the lineage of Nguni tribes, and even in your case very specifically, Amaxhosas, who are denying Amahlubi as a language, as a group of people, and as a sociological existence of South African cultural tapestries?
I beg yours?
Are there people that deny it?
Of course they are. There's a lot of them. And I can tell you that you will find out Amahlubi actually at one of the biggest grouping in South Africa.
Really?
The biggest than the Zulus themselves, even the Xhosas. During, I think the government can go and profit because we know how found amongst ourselves the Khilubedus, but we are spread up the whole places and the Xhosas and the Zulus and stuff like that. So that is why it's going to be it's not going to be that easy to sort out the issue of the Khilubedu languages. Because we are already under other groups, But we will get it right.
Yeah. If the government, Papiki, recognizes Tekela Ndebele as a language and say, hey, let's get it into schools, do we have enough people that can teach it correctly, enough people that can write in it, that can document it, to make sure that the language is revived? If the government says, whatever you need, we'll put the resources behind it.
Absolutely, Oliver. As I said that, well, there was a pilot project which was taking place at Khagapeni, Kamkombani, and there was a cohort of teachers who were trained post-1994, who were trained in the language itself. We are having an online dictionary by one of the Ndebele speakers. His name is Dr. Plachi Mahlobohwane. And we are also having Dr. Makare as one of the people who has written the languages. So we do have people who are even prepared to come up with things like dramas and short stories.
Yes. Lance, do you put resources behind such initiatives as PENS Lab?
Yes, indeed, and I think it is one of our focus areas. And we're also reliant, obviously, on not only speakers, but also the scientific community within the university ecosystem, particularly in the areas where these languages reside, to try and make a determination, not just looking at the morphology and also looking at the status planning as to what the level of that particular language is, and then to make a determination what type of support can be provided and where that language should reside in terms of its recognition within South Africa. So certainly it is something that we would like to look into in greater extent.
Yeah. Lance, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I really do appreciate it. And to our studio guests, Nkosi Khatebe, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Mr. Papiki, thank you so much for coming into studio. Thank you for the work you're doing in preserving your languages and making sure that South Africa doesn't lose what is an incredibly rich part of its cultural diversity. That brings us to the end of the show. We're back with you next week for another edition of Democracy 30. Thank you so much for being with us. If you want to continue the conversation, it is at SABC News, or you can find me. It is at Oliver_speaking on X. My name is Oliver Dixon. Thank you so much. Good night.